morning. My name is Lorraine of District 32, and I am really excited about the conversation this morning with Leanne Butterworth of Empathy First. And we're going to dig into what is the Empathy First business that Leanne now offers, but also I want to dig into the background of who is Leanne Butterworth and how come we've got this amazing service offering in the world today because of that. So Leanne, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for sparing the time and offering yourself. Leanne, I had just a little brief chat with you before we came on to the podcast. What I would really like to know is how you get started in Empathy First. What is your story? Because everyone's got a domino effect of incidences in their life that bring them to where they are now. What's yours?
Um, hmm. Empathy First is really an amalgamation of a lot of different lives that I've lived over the last lots of years. And really what it's come out of is this learning that there's this piece missing. And the way that I've come to learn that, I guess, is my background is in exercise physiology and sports psychology. I've worked in hospitals, I've worked in project management. After I took a few years off to have my kids, in about 2015, I went back and I worked with a not-for-profit that worked with youth mental health. As part of that, I was project managing and administering them. And as part of that, there was sort of this throwaway line of, oh, we need to do something for World Mental Health Day. And looking at some of the things that they'd already done, I came up with this project called Lose Your Mind. And what that was a virtual reality simulation of psychosis. And it was putting people in this 3.5 minute experience. And I had psychologists running workshops, and we were giving people with a very specific context insight into what that was like. So police, teachers, magistrates, psychologists. And I took that over to the US and ran it over there. And what happened was, when we ran these very specific workshops, there were a couple of times where I would tell my story of postnatal depression in that and what that meant and what that felt like. And people were really interested in that.
Yeah.
In 2018, I went back to uni and I studied nonprofit and philanthropy and social enterprise and human-centered design. And we talked about the why. And what happened was, my lecturer kept going, yeah, but why do you care? Why is this empathy thing? Why is this lose your mind thing? Why do you care? I'm like, oh, because people need to know this. She said, no, why do you care? I said, well, because I had postnatal depression and everybody around me dismissed it. And as a result, it wasn't diagnosed for a long time. And I don't want anybody else to feel dismissed like that. They went, there you go. And I went, ooh, okay. So I was running this project. I then took ownership of this project that was really trying to help people get personal insight and empathy when it came to really advanced psychosis. So
how did you, sorry, just on that, so I'm really
yeah.
interested when you're saying you've developed VR, a virtual reality space on
Yeah.
psychosis. You sort of just skipped across that as if that was a something that shouldn't be spoken about, right? Or it was just, oh, I just created this virtual reality psychosis. For that, to me, what actually is that? So
So
what does that look like?
what that was a 3.5 minute 360-degree video. So it was a real video that we filmed in 360 degrees in a classroom. And at the front of the classroom, a teacher is giving a talk. And I say to the people, I want you to listen to the talk. And Melissa's up there giving a talk. Throughout those 3.5 minutes, nothing happens at the beginning, but then we start imposing. We did this with a lot of sort of consultation and research. We start imposing then hallucinations. So there's some clowns and some snakes and some little girls and some voices that tell you that you suck. And it gets louder and louder, and the pictures start moving, and it's amping up, and you can hear your own breath. Then it ramps down and everything's okay again. So it's quite an intense experience. At the end of the talk, what I used to say to people is, right, what was the talk about? what was the name of the talk? And they'd say something about, oh God, something about gratitude, maybe. I go, no, what was the name of the talk? I told you to listen for the name of the talk. They're like, oh, I can't. And I said, why can't you? They said, because there was so much else going on. I said, not really. She said it a lot. And then they say, because I was distracted. You go, okay. Then we pull it apart even further. And she said, so Melissa at the front says the name of the talk 11 times in 3 minutes. Like, not, it wasn't hidden. It was very overt. And it was then looking at the impact stress has on short-term memory, asking people after this experience, what did you want? And a lot of people go, oh, I just wanted to smoke. I just wanted a drink. I just wanted a quiet minute. Oh, I said, did you want to be touched? No. Did you want to be yelled at? No. Did you remember instructions? No. Okay, so now let's start playing with that, because stress impacts short-term memory. And I say, you had that for 3.5 minutes. Undiagnosed psychosis in the USA is 74 weeks.
Wow.
We can't then say, just put the drugs down, just take your medication, you should just go for a walk, you should just ignore the voices. You couldn't. It was 3.5 minutes. And so there was a really interesting and profound way that these people, these practitioners who had context for this learning, were then able to go, oh, okay, I can see that, I get it. When I tried to use it, I did a couple of variations that didn't work. So it did work in that context. I did put it on people's heads who had zero context, didn't work because it was too advanced. So we didn't do that. And then I did do it once without the workshop attached to it. That also didn't work. So I turned down offers for that. At the beginning of 2020, then, I couldn't do virtual reality anymore. So I couldn't put things on people's faces in a pandemic. The whole business model fell apart at that time.
Wow.
And so what I was originally had sort of 30 people in a room. I was running 10 VR kits and sort of one person would do it, you clean it off, do the next. That then reduced either the group size down to maybe 5 or 6, because you then had to social distance. You had to really like spend minutes and minutes cleaning off these masks before you put them onto the next person. So it completely changed the viability of this business at that time. What happened then was, at the beginning of 2020, I said, what is the answer that people keep getting wrong here? What is this? How is it that very, very intelligent, skilled people are getting the same things wrong, which was, just give them advice or just give them a helpline or whatever it is. And so I pulled apart everything and pulled apart all the workshops, pulled apart my experience of postnatal depression, pulled apart human-centered design, which the first step is empathy, pulled apart everything and went, the piece that is missing here is healthy empathy. The piece that is missing here is an understanding of how to practice this skill in a way that is sustainable, in a way that builds connection, not drives disconnection. And in that space, I found names like Brene Brown, Jamil Zaki, Susan David, all of these people who are like, yeah, this is bigger than we think it is. So there's all these different pieces of the puzzle. When I then put it back together, so I sort of, at the beginning of COVID, sat there almost like, I don't know, like a detective, like a serial killer. Like, it was all laid out on the floor around me going, what is this thing? So that I could bring it to, I say, a muggle audience, an audience without context. So bring it to corporate, bring it to regular folks in regular jobs. And when they ask me, who's your niche market? I'm like, anybody with ears, because it became so foundational to the human experience that every single one of us wants to feel heard, valued, visible, and safe, but nobody knows how to create that. Nobody knows how to listen. So that's where Empathy First came from. And I created an expansion of what's commonly known as the 3 types of empathy. I created content on emotional literacy, unconscious bias, some language tools that we use. That then got put back together as Empathy First. And then when the world allowed it, then I sort of went, oh, this is my story. This is me. This is the thing that the world kind of needs, and I have to be the one to do it. So then that's where kind of it started to flourish out of that.
What a journey. Also, what a powerful tool that you created way back in the beginning. I just think that's I've never heard of anyone doing that before, to actually introduce, a 3.5 minute psychosis and what that might be like, to have that experiential experience is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. I mean, even filming it was interesting. We had 3-meter pythons in the room. I had my daughter, who was 6 at the time, in a little ghosty outfit, sort of jumping around the room. We had but everything we did had a reason for doing it. We didn't do it in cartoon. We didn't want people to go, oh yeah, that would be terrible. Yeah. We wanted people to go, whoa, what the, and actually have a stress response because of it, not be voyeuristic in somebody else's experience. Yeah. So it was really intentional, sort of how we did it. The quality of it is a little bit blurry, like it's not like 4D or HD or whatever it is, to sort of go, yeah, it's really, you have to kind of go, is that, and then you go, whoa, yes, that is. So it was really intentional how we created it. So it was, I mean, it was good while it lasted, but again, everything kind of fell apart with.
And now it's led on to, where you're meant to be, at this point. Now, you touched on just gently there a little bit of your own postnatal depression and some of the people you're talking with, digging into, well, why is that so important for you?
Yeah.
And the different perspectives coming back to allow you to really sit in the fact that, no, that is your story, that is your message, and becomes your purpose.
Absolutely.
What was that journey like for you? Did you list it, or did you just not place any importance on it? What happened there? How did that
go? I'm a Virgo. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a achievement-seeking perfectionist by nature. And when I had my children, I had 2 under 2. Nothing was perfect. I could control nothing. I remember being in a crying heap on the floor, like literally on the other side, like 2 meters away on the floor, crying with my 2 toddlers rubbing my back, going, Mummy, we're sorry. Mummy, what did we do? Mummy, how do we make it better? And I was just coping with nothing. And mine came out as postnatal rage. And I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I was angry and I was anxious and I was panicking and everybody. But the thing was, everybody around me was like, oh, the days are long, the years are short. We all got through it. Cherish these moments. They're like, this will be over in a heartbeat. Yeah. Somebody even went, the medication comes in 2 varieties, red and white. So just have a drink. Like, that's why mummy wine o'clock is a thing. And I'm lucky I didn't become like a raging alcoholic at that time. And this sort of went on. So I had one at the end of 2010, Zara then the middle of 2012. I was diagnosed the day before Zara's 3rd birthday, which means I had this potentially for 4.5 years. And it made no sense to me. And then one day I was at the doctor, and I have literally spoken about this on a world stage. It was in my TEDx talk. But I went to the doctor, it was for Zara. And we were there for her 3-year-old development checks. And it was just a normal appointment. And the doctor's just a lovely Irish lady. She's like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. She's like, no, how are you? Like, this is all about Zara, but how are you? I'm like, yeah, well, and I'm like laughing it off, going, I'm stressed from the moment I open my eyes to the moment I close my eyes. And even then I'm not sleeping. I'm just this seething ball of rage. And I was like, and her kids are basically the same age as mine. And I was like, yay for motherhood. Like, this is great. And she's like, oh, this is bigger than you think it is. Let's see what's going on. And it was that word let's that sort of caught my attention, that it wasn't somebody going, oh, yeah, you should just you should just get up earlier. You should just go to bed earlier. You should just, whatever it is, just call your mum. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. And so when we sort of did a few things and did a few tests and figured out what was going on, and she's like, yeah, this is late diagnosed postnatal depression.
Wow.
So then I went on medication. I was on medication for 15 months, and it wiped out the lows, the wanting to drive off into the sunset, I'm done with this lows. But it also rubbed out the highs, and I had a massive headache for the first and last month, but rubbed out the highs. So I was kind of this numb, sleepy mess for about 15 months, but it got easier. And then I stopped and it was all okay. But yeah, that, and then in pulling apart everything for Empathy First, I was like, why were people saying it'll all be okay? Why isn't that a good answer? Why is dismissal? Why didn't I feel validated? Why did nobody take this seriously? What was going on here? And again, I kept coming back to this empathy thing, this thing that we all go, emotions, gross. And then sort of put that back together. So yeah, it's bizarre the way that life sort of turns out, that one of the lowest points in my life is now one of the things that is a huge catalyst for what I do.
That's how do you feel now looking back on that? Like when you finally got the diagnosis, was that a relief to you? Or did that stir up other emotions? Were you angry at that?
Oh, my inner perfectionist was terrified. So the inner perfectionist was like, I failed as a mother. What's going on? Like, this doesn't happen I had, like, in my head, I was like, I had 2 all natural water births, no drugs, no stitches. Like, we don't get postnatal depression. Like, no. So it was a huge sort of pushback, and a huge realization that, oh, you don't have to be perfect. You're allowed to ask for help. Like, all of these sort of things that I now teach, a lot of that stuff I had to learn because, like I said, I'm a achievement seeking perfectionist by nature, and that is completely at odds with healthy empathy. So I've had to unlearn a lot of that, unpack a lot of that, be okay with the fact that my brain was mush at the time. Like, that's the technical term for it when it comes to people who've had small children, and be okay with the fact that it wasn't perfect. It wasn't postcards and sitting on Santa's lap kind of, yay.
Little bluebirds over your head while you nurse your children.
My children give me my reason to live.
Yeah.
Like, was not my experience. I like my children. They're 14 and 12 now. It's a whole other set of problems, or a set of, not problems, issues to deal with. But yeah, that sort of self-compassion came out of that as well.
Which I just think is such a timely message to bring to the world, because I think it's important that people like yourself speak up and share what you just shared, because that empathy, I think, has been so far suppressed, if you could say that. It's not been allowed to be there. For decades, our ancestors and the generations before us, that's just not how we did it. Or they did it.
Not.
You know, it was toughen up, shut up, get on with it. Causing suppression, illness,
a
whole barrage of stuff. And I think we're in the middle of a time in our humanity where people are being aware of, what are emotions, how do we handle emotions, how do we listen, and people like yourself are here as one of the game changers, to help facilitate that message, and that it's okay.
Well, I've had thank you for that. I've had women in their 50s and 60s come up to me and message me after my talk and say, I think I had it,
Mm.
but nobody talked about it. I think I had that. And no, and there was nothing. There was no internet in the house by yourself. And the interesting thing is, or the thing that kind of scares me a little bit is I remember once just raging, and it was just postnatal rage. I was just pissed off all the time. And I remember raging in my child's face. Zara was 18 months old, and kind of catching myself and going, whoa, 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 whoa. And we've got a galley kitchen, and at the time it had a baby gate over it. So I have a photo of me up the end of the baby gate with these two little children at the baby gate looking at mummy. And I can see Zara's crying, and I can see Rowan is kind of trying to comfort her, and they're both on the other side of this baby gate. And I'm like, mummy's in timeout. Mummy, no, 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 no. Like, I love you dearly, but I need to be kind of. But the thing that scares me is if I had done something, if I had done something to myself, and one of the highest cause of death in the first 12 months after a woman has a baby is taking her own life, there is absolutely zero chance I would have been painted in an empathetic light. I would have been the villain on the front of that newspaper.
Yeah.
That scares the living snot out of me, because I had no idea that it was postnatal depression. I had no idea that there was support, because everybody around me was saying, this is normal. We all got through it. And that's the bit that scares me intensely. So yeah, I was relieved in a sense once that rage went away, once that wanting to drive off into the sunset went away, but also knowing it wasn't my fault. There was nothing that I did apart from have a baby that caused this. I didn't choose to be angry. There was brain chemistry and brain changes going on that happen after a woman has a baby. That it happens. And that was 10 years ago, 10, 11, 9 years ago. The conversation has progressed a lot in that time, but I don't know that maternal mental health is still kind of at the top of our list of priorities. So anyway, so I don't remember what the question was.
No, the question was, how did you handle the diagnosis? And then what was that like for you in those 15 months? Because there's still a stigma around any sort of mental health, whether it is postnatal depression or, anxiety.
Yep.
There's a stigma around there. There's a little bit of shame there. And, oh my God, I'm human.
Yeah.
You seem to be, your machines, and you can, there might be the feelings of failure there if we're not performing and we're not being these robots and these machines, and we've got our shit together all the time.
Oh,
And
I
it's
have
just
my shit together none of the time. But also taking this different perspective, that when I talk about empathy, for example, or when I talk about people, I'll often talk about brains. And so things like stressed brains, not stressed people, but stressed brains don't retain information. Stressed brains don't like uncertainty. They don't like unfamiliarity, and they'll go where they feel safe. Like, by looking at it from a brain perspective and in a system, because all brains sort of live in a system, but it kind of helped me to go, oh, that's how my brain works. Not I am a bad person, but my brain was malfunctioning. And I use the same language and context in empathy, emotional literacy, unconscious bias. What is your brain doing? What are we afraid of? How does fear impact empathy? Right. Now we can start to pull it apart and put it back together. So that was one of the key sort of learnings of me not feeling guilty and not feeling shame and not feeling any of those things. There are actually a couple of people who, once they found out I was on medication, went, oh, this is a thing. And it helped, I guess, other people go, yeah, I think that's me. I think I had that. I think I need help. You're like, Amazing.
I think it's great how you're bringing the brain and the aspects of that also into the top, because it's something that people can touch and feel. You know, they can. It's like a
Yeah.
stepping stone to understanding it. Okay, you're talking about the physical brain. I can get that. You know, and
Yeah.
again, we were just never taught about how our brains work
No.
or how
But
we're wired.
I love the fist model of the brain. And I can explain the fist. I used it with primary schoolers the other day. I've used it with CEOs. Is if you make a fist, tuck your thumb in. This big fingery bit is the thinky bit at the front. That's your prefrontal cortex. The thumb in the middle is the emotional brain, the limbic system. That's basically your toddler having a tantrum. And the bit at the back, that's your brain stem. That's sort of feeling and movement that goes down into your body. But when you have a toddler tantrum, when you have big emotions, you literally flip your lid, which means that you actually reduce blood flow to the thinky part of your brain. And you go, oh, okay. And then we talk about emotional regulation. We can talk about emotional literacy. We can talk about unconscious bias. But by making it simple and visual and touchable, tangible, you go, oh, okay. Yeah. Now I can conceptualize these things, pull them apart, and put them back together in a way that makes sense to me. And that's the thing that I think has been missing in a lot of this conversation. It's been very almost pathologizing a lot of people. Is it anxiety? Is it this? You know, kind of doesn't matter. The person still wants to feel heard, valued, visible, and safe. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. So I love that, right? Because we remember that when we see the physical model and it's, you know, it's sensory. So you spoke earlier about, you know, this journey then becomes it's like your greatest suffering becomes your greatest gift, and that catalyst and how that came about for you. And what I really loved was you said that the question you asked yourself was, how do I bring this to people without context? And I thought, what a great question that was, because the business offering and the service offering comes out of asking those questions. So tell me about that and that questioning period and how you came to have what you have now or what you're offering now.
So the phrase that kept sort of coming up for me was meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't coming in saying this is what empathy is. It was looking at how empathetic is Australia. For example, what beliefs do we have? What myths do we have? How do we feel about this word? What are all the things that we're chucking in? Why are we afraid of this word? Do we think that we are empathetic? What do we think that even is? And in doing that, I sort of came up with these myths that we keep hearing. And by believing these myths, it makes perfect sense then that we would step away from empathy. So some of the myths are things like you're either born with it or you're not. Well, no, research shows that empathy is a learned skill, and even believing that it's a learned skill makes you more empathetic, because then you lean into it and go, oh, I can get better at this. Yeah. If you think it's a fixed trait, probably not. There's a beautiful research paper called No Country for Girly Men, specifically looked at that question. How does framing empathy change how much we lean into it or practice it? Empathy is just give, give, give. No, because you're then no longer practicing empathy. You're then just doing that for yourself, because that's actually not what other people want. Empathy doesn't belong at work. Well, no, the research is completely against that now. Empathy is just for the girls. Empathy is a weakness, wow, which is absolutely not true, because when we look at who are our best bosses, leaders, coaches, teachers, and they're the ones who listened and encouraged us and challenged us and made us feel like we matter. Yeah, they're probably not operating from a position of weakness. Mm-hmm. They're operating from a position of strength. The ones who belittle us, micromanage us, don't trust us, dismiss us, they're the ones operating from a position of fear and weakness and insecurity. So looking at thinking that empathy is just feeling the feelings. It's just, oh, you must want me to feel more. So if it's just feeling the feelings and you want me to feel more, because makes perfect sense, Australia is the second most individualist country in the world. Me, my, more. Empathy's feeling the feelings. You want me to feel more. Yuck, gross. No, I don't have the bandwidth, capacity, vocabulary to do that. I just don't want to. And you go, actually, it's not. What you've just described is unhealthy emotional empathy, and nobody wants that because it's no longer.
What you're also doing there is redefining what strength is.
100%.
So if you come at it from both angles and the opposites, we can have some transformation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you bring in concepts like growth mindset. You bring in concepts like self-regulation, co-regulation, emotional literacy, the ability to understand emotions, not emotional intelligence, which is why am I feeling that, but emotional literacy. What is an emotion? And emotional vocabulary. Could I name an emotion? Like most people just go mad, bad, sad, glad, done. Yeah. And you cannot connect with people. Like I literally have emotions wheels getting around. And when you play with them, then you can start to go, oh, okay. Now I can change my language around emotions. I can change my language around neuroscience, unconscious biases, strength, growth mindset, self-curiosity, self-empathy, self-regulation, emotional maturity, healthy empathy. Okay, now I can play with these concepts because we're all talking about the same thing.
And you can play with this being a human and
100%.
what it feels like to connect with yourself and others, and what are these experiences and these emotions that are arising, and can we name them, and can we look at it?
Yeah. And taking the pressure off ourselves to say the right thing, do the right thing, have the right response, be perfect, give the best advice, like take all of that pressure off to get the gold star, because there is no gold star.
Yeah.
Like there is no right thing to say. There is no perfect script. It is literally going, yeah, right. Thank you so much for telling me that. I have no idea what to say, but I'm really glad you told me. Let's go for a walk. I'm here for you.
Nice. So how are you bringing this then to the world, Leanne? This is your gift. So I've seen you, or you're on stage, you're sharing your story, but at the grassroots level, are you working with people one-on-one? Are you working, I know you're entering the corporate space and you're working with teams. Can you just dig into that, please, and let us know that the mechanics of how is that? How are you bringing this to the world?
So at the moment, I have two primary offers with a fun third on the side. So the primary offers are keynotes, so getting up in front of an audience and giving them an hour of the high level why this matters, what, why, how sort of stuff. The training is sort of a few hours to a full day with a team or with a group of leaders to pull this apart as a really bespoke way of looking at what's going on in their organization, why this matters. And it might have a team focus, it might have a client focus, it might have a self focus, it might have a design focus. But I really work closely with an organization to go, right, what do you need? What is going on? What are the things that you are noticing?
Yeah.
So they're the two that I do sort of the most often, and that I guess sell the most. Yeah. On top of that, I've also got the Empathy store, which is all my merch, which is good fun, which is things like don't believe everything you think, written on a t-shirt and a hoodie and all those sorts of things. And then there's the online courses. So I've got 3 online courses. One's the Emotional Literacy Bootcamp. One is how to write, and that one's like $30. The how to write empathetic emails is free, and it's on my website. And then you've got sort of the foundational course of what is healthy empathy, and it's again just an online course. It's like $100, but getting people to kind of dip their toe into this content. There's resources and all those sorts of things. In addition to that, there's the podcast, which is called the Professional Empathy Podcast. And in doing that, I literally speak to people in all different professions about what is the value, what is the role of healthy empathy in your profession. What is going on? So it might be, we've spoken about menopause at work. We've spoken to a sex worker, a male sex worker, about what is the value of empathy for you and from you. We've talked to an emergency medical dispatcher. We've talked to a pediatric surgeon. We've talked to police and fireys and aged care and human resources and leadership, all these different, even real estate. What is the value of empathy in real estate? And being able to pull it apart. So tattoo art was an amazing conversation. And I love it so much because I get to play with empathy in tattoo art and go, what is the value as a tattoo artist of showing empathy for your client and for your team? And what do you want us to know? How do we better support our tattoo artists, our surgeons, all those sorts of things?
What a joyful conversation to
Oh,
have. You must be
I love it
learning
so much.
this
And
this new world of connection
oh,
and empathy with all these different professions.
yeah, it's amazing. And then sort of in on top of that, we do things like, well, conversations about death. We do menopause at work, menstruation at work, neurodiversity at work, dementia. So all of these sort of life experiences, what is the value of healthy empathy when it comes to menopause at work? When it comes to menstruation at work? How are people doing this? What is the value of this? And I love them so much. They're all like I love them. We did empathy and drag. I have
Yes.
a drag queen math
Nice.
teacher from Pennsylvania who I interviewed about drag, and why it matters, why representation matters. Yeah, so it's good fun. So speaking, workshops, a shop, online courses, and the podcast, which I absolutely love.
Well, you can tell because you just obviously glow and light up when you're talking about your stories. You can see where your jam is there. And I would also like to take this chance to share with people, you did a keynote for some of the business owners in the Gold Coast with District 32. And that was massively well received. The topic, the delivery, your heartfelt sharing it's just needed. It was just welcomed. It was
Yeah.
beautiful in that space. So thank you very much. We
Oh,
highly
you're welcome.
recommend anyone who's looking for keynote speakers or
Ah,
training facilitator. But
oh,
Leanne,
thank you.
so
That
how do
one,
people, not on you go, sorry.
I was going to say that one was the empathy ROI. What is the role of empathy and profitability? That
Hmm.
was fun.
That gets the corporate's ears ticked up.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Or
The
the small
empathy,
business. Yeah.
yeah, the empathy ROI, the role of empathy and profitability was, and case studies and all that sort of stuff was
Nice.
great.
Very nice, right? It lets us listen a little bit differently or pay attention to what we're doing in our business a little bit differently. So, Leanne, just before I go on to how people can contact you and your details and stuff, I like to sign off with, what is if you've only got one message for the entire humanity, what would that be?
Oh, look, um, I have a shirt, and to me, it's empathy in a nutshell, but it does use it uses a little swear word. But it's empathy in a nutshell is give a shit and get curious. You've really got to care about the people, and you've got to really get curious about them and about how you think. So get curious about how your brain works, get curious about what's going on in the world, get curious about your assumptions about other people, and get curious about what's going on for other people. But in order to do that, you have to care about them as a human being, not as a resource, not as a number, not as someone you deal with, but actually care about that human as a human. So it's not the sexiest tagline, but give a shit and get curious. I have it written on a tote bag because to me
Love
it
it.
distills down what it is that we're trying to do here.
It's a universal language. Everybody knows what you're talking about, right? So let's just forget about the fluff and get straight to the chase. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's a really important message. So how can people contact you then, Leanne? Is it okay if we put links to your podcast and your TEDx talk, and
100%.
YouTube and everything all in the in this video?
Absolutely. It's if you type in empathyfirst.com.au, you will find me. If you go into Google, and I'm pretty sure if you type in Leanne Empathy, you will find me. But empathyfirst.com.au, there's everything there, from the podcast to the shop to the online courses to my TEDx talk to my 17x talk about empathy and quiet quitting. It is all there. And coming up next year, we've got a webinar series about empathy and leadership. So it is the empathy-driven leaders webinar series coming up.
Beautiful. Leanne Butterworth, it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your genius. And I look forward to speaking to you again. I'm going to meet you next week, face to face, over in the Gold Coast. So I look forward to seeing you then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lorraine.